Good morning, everyone. Hello, Ian. So, got a special guest here this morning, Pastor Ian Shelton. Been in Toowoomba for how long?
About 47 years.
So, 47 years of history of pastoring in Toowoomba. So, great. Thank you for joining this morning.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, this, lockdown, COVID, everything happening. How have you experienced the last 4 or 5 months?
There's been the good, the bad, and quite ugly.
Yeah.
It was a shock. I've been travelling the last 3 years, 2 to 3 weeks each month. And so literally in one day, all of that stopped.
Yes.
And I was stuck in my home office. I think, how long was the original lockdown? 6 weeks, 2 months.
Yeah.
Not even left my property. So that was a surprise.
And that's not your nature, isn't it? You
not
like to talk to people. Did you get depressed a little bit, like cabin fever or something like that?
Well, I think in retrospect, probably yes, but maybe my wife got more depressed. No,
Go out.
Yeah,
Go
wondered if
out.
I could go for another trip.
Yeah.
No, look. After saying that, there was a lot of good has come out of it.
Yeah.
Our strategy, I work for a group called One Heart, and we do something called Movement Day,
Yes.
which and that's all over the globe. And so I'd just been to Los Angeles, and just come back from another thing in Brisbane, and so I was travelling constantly. So all the travel strategy had to stop, of course.
Yes.
And so then what was the new strategy? And it took probably 6 weeks, 2 months to really sort that through.
Yes.
Now we thank God for Zoom.
Yes.
And we've developed a whole new strategy using Zoom to keep in contact with Australian people involved in this area, and then South Pacific, and then the global. And so that's been great. And in some ways, Zoom has actually built closer relationships with some of my global friends than the travel, because we are Zooming more often than I would meet them normally through travel.
Yes.
And we could have some longer conversations, especially the small Zooms where there was only 6 or 8 on.
Yes.
It was like sitting in a lounge room together, so there was a lot of good there.
Yes.
I think some of the negative is when there's bigger Zooms with 60, 80 or even in the hundreds,
Yes.
where only 1 or 2 or 3 can present and people just have to sit there. You don't
It's
get
very
to know
passive after a while.
quite passive, and it's draining and tiring.
Yeah.
So there's been the good, there's been the challenging.
Yeah.
I think the other thing we've done, in an old shed behind our church, we've turned it into a little TV studio on the cheap. And so we're doing a lot of content, not just myself, but others as well.
Yes.
Interviews from around the world,
Yes.
which are posted on Facebook and websites. And then some little theological content as well.
So people can find you on Facebook. What do they have to look for?
Movement Day Australia.
Movement Day Australia, and then they can see stuff you're producing.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah. Yeah, you sound positive about that. I probably would have to say that Zoom, I like the Zoom prayer meetings. It took me a while to get used to it, because you have all those faces looking at you, but you close your eyes. I think the prayer really works. Again, not maybe the huge meetings, but what would you say to people that say, "Oh, I'm zoomed out, just can't have it anymore"?
Yes, well, a lot of leaders are a bit zoomed out, and including myself a little.
Yeah.
But last night I was on a prayer meeting with Japanese leaders.
Yes.
And what a joy that was! An hour and a half it was.
Yes.
And they would have a subject, someone would speak to it, and then we'd go into a small room with about 4 or 5 of us.
Yes.
And the same one. So we went back and forwards into the room over the whole hour and a half, and I came to really enjoy it.
Yeah. So you were in Japan yesterday. So
I was in Japan yesterday.
Yeah. So that is amazing. That literally is amazing.
Totally.
So I'm conscious of time. Do you think in what you've been sharing right now, is there maybe a message for the church? Maybe just a church member, maybe listening, or someone listening in.
Yeah.
What could be a takeaway from that?
Look, I suppose I wonder if God's not allowing the deinstitutionalisation of the church.
Yes.
And I had a Zoom with an Anglican Archbishop the other day.
Yeah.
And he even said maybe denominations are an impediment for the new day and the new church and the new world that we're coming into.
Yeah.
In other words, he was saying we've got to learn to work together more for the sake of the gospel in our cities.
Okay. Okay, I know that's on your heart. I guess, you know, a slightly smaller takeaway for me when I'm listening to you is, you know, everything that you've been doing beforehand, your whole model of ministry came to a stop.
Yeah.
And it took you 6 to 8 weeks, so, you know, it took you a little while, and then you built up something new, but you were ready to embrace something new. Yeah. And it took a discipline, learning, you had to build a studio and everything. And I think this is a day, lots of things are changing, but in order to keep doing the ministry with God, to be obedient to Him, to go where He leads, I think we've got to be ready to embrace change. What do you think?
Definitely. On the personal side, I've loved the house churches that we had before we came back together as a congregation. It was very lovely just to go and sit in a circle with 20 or 30 other people, the little children. Everybody was praying, everybody was entering in, people were sharing testimonies. It was much more life-giving in many ways than a traditional congregational service where perhaps only 2 or 3 get to share.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if this more personal, relational approach could be one of the ways ahead, where we do Sunday mornings much more relaxed together in smaller groups around, and we used to have 2-hour lunches after, and we just loved it. So, and I sort of miss that a little.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Like, you know, I'm listening to you, and I what I get is a bit of optimism. It's positive. You know, there are new developments. You're doing this, and this is working, and I think this is a time for all of us where, you know, God is at work and God is doing things. We just have to learn to be on His program, just move with the time and with the Spirit of God, and not be discouraged along the way. Hey, when the cabin fever comes. Do you have a Bible verse for us, maybe one, I don't know.
A Bible verse off the top. Oh wow!
The pressure is on.
The whole Bible is wonderful. I'm very thankful for the season that I've been able to do much more Bible reading, and I have a great joy in that. I think this a scripture that I prayed this morning in a prayer meeting, where the Lord said, "As surely as I live, all the earth will be filled with His glory."
Yes.
And that was in the midst of some difficulties for the children of Israel.
Yes.
So I love God's optimism that He will fulfill His heart and plan for all of our lives, no matter where we are, how little we are, how big we are, how unimportant we are. He'll fulfill His plans, and our trust is in Him.
That's a great verse, and it's a great way of ending today. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Edgar.
And encouragement for today. I guess move with God and trust His glory will come all over the world. Have a great day. Bye for now.